My name is Juliet Mitchell. I'm not a specialist. I'm what people call a polymath, which means I go across a lot of disciplines. I'm a professor of psychoanalysis and gender studies in the University of Cambridge, where I established a centre for gender studies. I'm also a professor in University College London, where I teach a graduate course on theoretical psychoanalysis. Welcome to my exp. I think that I started to look at feminism in a systematic way when I first read Simone de Beauvoir. I realised from being a student at Oxford the extraordinary gender disparity that there was between the 1 in 12 students who were women and the 12 men who were men, all of whom were dominated by the public school ethos and hadn't really seen a woman since they were 8 years old and went to boarding school. And I thought, well, let me understand a bit about this. And Simone de Beauvoir's book, The Second Sex, was very much on the agenda of an interest that we all had in French literature and things. And so I read Simone de Beauvoir and was horrified. I thought, my God, is it as bad as that here? Is it really as awful as she's making out? And I started work in the late 50s to look at the situation of women in Britain. And I'm afraid I found it was as bad. It wasn't only as bad in a very obvious way of very, very poor pay. If anything, everyone says it was half pay. I think it was often under half pay because it was much lower jobs and so on, and huge discriminations. In fact, what had happened was a discrimination that set up a division between women in the family and women in work. Once I've realised that there was no such thing as woman in the census and that we were, in a sense, no one. And there are phrases like in imperial China, if anybody knocked at the door and there was only the housewife there, the wife and mother or widow and mother, whatever she was, she actually called out, no one is here. So no one is very, very important. No one and other are very important. So I thought, well, OK, where do we find women? Because after all, we are here. There's no question about it. Here we are. Where do we find it? And at that stage, at the early 60s by now I'm talking about, everybody was on the sort of socialist left or radical position at all, was saying, let's get rid of the family. There was a terrific movement to get rid of the family. At the same time, paradoxically, there were an enormous number of books being produced on the family. So I thought, well, if women don't exist as women, but only as maid, daughter, widow, and wife, then we must exist in the family. And that was later to become the phrase, the personal is political, which I think is a hugely important phrase. I'd say it's almost the most important phrase of second wave feminism. But at this point, it wasn't yet there. So I thought, well, OK, I need to understand the family, which is, in it, where a substitute for women. It's what women do. Women do the family. That's where they are. That's where they were feeling so absolutely isolated within during the 50s. I think the radicalism of the feminist movement and second wave feminism was multiple. Things like consciousness raising, which was its creation borrowed from some Chinese practices, but very much developed in feminist terms, in which everybody, not only were we meant to be equal with each other and share privileged positions and share unprivileged positions like dressing all the envelopes to rally for great big mass demonstrations, etc. But also I, at that point, didn't have children. And in the street group I was in, the local street group, we looked after each other's children as well, even if we didn't have them. We cooked a meal for each other every night. So I would say that from a retrospective point of view, one of the main things that came out of it was the complex and problematic, but incredibly important concept of sisterhood, and that sisters are different from relationships with men. So it's not that individual men are necessarily oppressive. Many individual men can be quite feminist, but nevertheless, just as it is white people who are the oppressors for black people, however decent any individual white person might be and however supportive of a black struggle they might be, it is white people who are the problem. So it is men who are the problem. And that, I think, is the analysis of patriarchy, which I then went on to, but I would say was established with the foundation of the National Organization of Women in 1966, as what we had to do was on all counts combat patriarchy. I think I see it, the revolutionary aspect of the feminist combat, and my hope within it isn't one in which we have a sudden ending and, oh gosh, let's chalk it up that we're all equal. It's the revaluation of what women do. Women are in a different historical position. I don't think we're in the different biological position is that important. But historically, of course, we're in a very different position. If you look at the number of men today who as doctors are going to get out of the caring profession because it's just been too much, and it's women as nurses who are going to stay in the caring profession. And I think that what we have to do is revalue the work of caring. We want a different and better society in which what women's contribution as women, which is hugely important. How would we live if it wasn't for what women do? We wouldn't, we couldn't. We need women's caring to be valued at least as much as men. Men have to go and fight, women care. Let women care and everybody care and nobody fight.